Hello, hello, Amplify You family. Michelle Abraham here. I'm your host, and today I am bringing you a behind the mic interview with Laurel Rutledge from the Rutledge Perspective podcast. Laurel, has been awesome to see her launching her podcast and it growing over the last year. And I'm just super excited to bring Laurel to you. So Laurel has so many years experience in HR, and she's HR professional, and she really decided to just do it on her own, and becoming a consultant. And I think she's really built up a platform that's really unique for small business owners to be able to have an HR person at the tip of their fingertips without having to invest in a huge HR company or a huge part of your company in HR management. So I'm not doing it any justice. Laurel is so much better than I'm explaining right now. I apologize, Laurel. But I just wanted to say, I just love what you're doing. I love your podcast, and I just am so happy that you're here with us today. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. When I saw the thing, I was like, oh yes, I can't wait to talk to Michelle.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I know sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't interviewed you on our podcast yet. And I'd love to see podcasts get going first and get them rolling and see some momentum with them, and then bring it on and say, like, what's it doing for you? Like, how's it working for you? And like, tell us a little bit about your podcast, first of all. Tell us all about it.
I never thought I'd be doing podcasts. I never thought I'd be doing a radio show. I never thought I'd be doing any of that. And I love it. And it's called the Rutledge Perspective for a reason, because I truly believe that if you can change a perspective, you can change your circumstances. And everything we do is all a matter of perspective. And so we get caught up in a lot of craziness. And if we can talk through some of those things and really own who we are, own our own issues and be aware of those, but also stand in our power and move through this crazy corporate arena, I think it makes it so much easier. So I put this together in the podcast. The whole point of it was to really speak to those who are trying to manage a career, whether that's corporate or otherwise, and how do they move through that successfully, and really be a place of authenticity and truth. And let's just talk about those things that are top of mind, that are either keeping us in a rut or making us want to jump off the ledge. And how do I talk you back from that and get you to stand in what you own and your own confidence? And let's make a plan for getting you to understand who you are, where you are, what you really want, and then how you get there. So that's the whole point. And I love it. I love doing it.
And I just love your from out of the rut into up the ledge. I just love that little saying, and how perfectly fit with your last name, right?
Yes, exactly.
Such a great little play on that. I love it. So, and who do you interview on your podcast?
So when I started the podcast, it was just me kind of really talking about my perspective, but I always knew I wanted to start interviewing people. And what I've been doing is interviewing women. And some of them are entrepreneurs, some of them are in corporate. But the whole point of the interview is, where are you now and what was your journey? Because I think it's important for people to understand everyone's journey is different. And so I've had people who have done so many different things during their journey. I've had other people who have been in the same thing for the longest time because it is truly where their passion is, and everything in between. And the people who have built businesses, some have built them, lost them, and then built them again. And it's just all about, again, standing in your power, knowing that your journey is your journey, and all of it is bringing you to where you're supposed to be. All learning is learning, right? And all failures are opportunity to learn, just as all successes are. So I love interviewing these women. And I'm really excited because I should be interviewing here in August a woman who is just the most amazing person. And she's actually a mentor of mine, and she is the general counsel for a really large company up in Chicago. And her very first board appointment was on a Fortune 100 steel company.
Wow.
And so, she's just incredible. And she's a lawyer, but she's also a business person. She's amazing. So hopefully I'll get her in August. But I got a whole lineup of people.
You've
and they're
had
just
some
really
incredible
cool
guests on your podcast. Do you have a favorite one to date so far?
You know what? I really don't, because they're all such incredible women. But every time I do one of them says something like, oh my God, that was so good. So I learn, even though I know them, I always learn something from each one of them. So I really don't have a favorite. They're all just so fantastic. And I actually go back and listen to them as well. Cause I'm like, oh, she said so-and-so, and I want to put that in the radio show. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's so great about podcasting. One, it's like a great networking tool. And
Yes.
two, it's like, I always learn something new every time I have someone on a show too. It's like,
Yes.
you're always learning, you're always getting to, meet really cool people. And
Right.
when you're looking for guests, Laurel, what do you look for in a guest?
So I am focused on women. So that's number one.
Mhm.
I really want to focus on interviewing women. And I'm either looking at women who are moving through that corporate ladder. So they're at a senior manager or up level,
Mhm.
or they have built a business. And even in building the business, it doesn't have to be some really, really huge mega thing. It can truly be, hey, here's what I'm doing and here's how I help. Because what I'm looking for is someone who has had a journey and is willing to tell their story, because they want to lift other women up as they go through their journey. Whether that's, I really want to be a CEO one day, or it's, no, I've decided it's time for me to step out. And you just get so much from them. So you got to be a woman. And then beyond that, just someone who really wants to tell their story and help other women move through their desires and what they want to do.
Yeah, I love that. Us women got to support each other because we
Yes.
still are paid significantly less in the corporate world, and we
Yes.
still have to fight a lot harder to get those positions. So,
Absolutely.
and I was speaking to a friend of mine who does a lot of work in coaching women in corporate, and she said there's still
Mhm.
there's not a lot of there you think we'd be all cheerleading and supporting each other,
Right.
but because of the in male dominated environment, there's a lot of still cattiness and things that goes on
Yes.
when other women are achieving, right? So
Mhm.
so sad,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's great to have
Yeah.
things, bringing in people with that are you admire their
Right.
path and their journey, what they've done, and we can all learn from how they've managed their career, and in so many just gems of information come out of that.
Yes.
Love that.
Exactly. Exactly. And that to me was the whole point too, is I really started this business, and I do have that long-term HR background, but I've done accounting. My undergrad was in accounting. I was an auditor for a while. I did consulting with one of the big four, and but it came to, and then wound up in HR, right? And spent the last
Mhm.
probably 20 years in HR. But the whole point when I left corporate was to say, I don't want any other woman to feel like I felt. So when I started this business, both lines of the business, I really started on that personal advisory piece. And I call it personal advisory for a reason, because it's a little more mentor, truth telling, bootstrapping than just, kind of the surface level sometimes that the detailed coaching can be. It is much more kind of intimate than that. But I don't want any woman to think that they're crazy. And I don't want anyone to think that they can't do it. And I want everyone to stand in the power of choice, because we all have a choice. And corporations will make you think you don't have a choice. And you do. Now, some choices are better than others, but you do have a choice, and you don't have to stay someplace you're miserable. As my friend Kim, who I interviewed, she's the chief human resources officer for WW, formerly Weight Watchers. She's like, no is just the beginning of the conversation. That's not the end, right? You don't always have to take a no. And so I really wanted to be able to empower women and give them strength to say, wait, this isn't working for me. Let's see if I can fix it where I am. Or, I tried, and now I'm going to try to do something different somewhere else. And so that really, when I look at my overall business, I truly believe that whether you are building a business or whether you're building a career, it all comes down to strategy and people. Those are the two things. You got to have a strategy, and you got to know the people, because if you don't know where you're going, how do you know who you need on your team? Whether that's a team to build your business or a team to build your career, right? Your village. So I am having the best time building this business and meeting such amazing women.
That's awesome. Now, do you use your podcast as a way to connect with people that you maybe wouldn't be able to otherwise?
Absolutely. And so as I post it and as I get comments, I always reach back out to people to see what they're thinking. And I've had a number of people reach out to me too about being on the podcast. And I'm kind of careful about that, because some of the people that reach out, it's really more kind of salesy. They really want to sell their business. And the podcast, the Rutledge Perspective, is really about support and uplift and movement, because you can get that business coaching. I've got a fantastic business coach, a fantastic mastermind. And so there are people who do that really well. And I could do that if I wanted to, but for me, my zone of genius is really in building up that confidence and competence to say, you have a choice. You're not crazy. Let's figure out how you make this work. Let's make sure you're aware. And so as you move through your career, you can really take advantage of every opportunity that there is for you. And you can show up authentically, and you can show up strong, and you can make decisions that make sense for you. And then at the same time, helping small businesses really understand that HR is not rocket science. It's not a necessary evil, but it does take a little bit of detail and some attention to detail. But it also comes down to people. Right? It's all about people. And so if I can get everyone to really understand, if you just lead with compassion, right? If you lead with your heart, but if you act with your head, business or career, you'll get where you want to go.
That's a quotable, Laurel. I like that. I love that one. That's great.
Lead with your heart, act with your head. Yeah,
exactly. That's funny. Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, because it's actually kind of different than what you normally hear. We say lead with your heart, not with your head, but it's lead with your heart and then with your head.
Yes,
I love it.
exactly.
Yeah, very different perspective on that. I love it.
Yeah.
And I love what you're creating too. So now you've really created something unique in the space that you're in, because you're now working with people who maybe are solopreneurs. And, you know, like we were talking about before we press record, that maybe you need to hire a tech guy or an HR person, and they're going to go with the tech guy because they can get the more mileage out of the tech stuff, right? But they still need to know the HR stuff, especially if you're building a team. And, you know, we can only get so far on our own, and then we definitely need to have that team. I mean, I'm going through that in my business too. Like you can just get so much farther with the support. And so now people are able to reach out to you. You have a program in place where now they can get all the HR information that they need without actually having to have an HR person on their team. And then they can do consulting too with you and have access to, which I think that's brilliant. That is a really great way of taking a whole industry and really changing the way that it's run and offering it to a group that wouldn't be able to access that normally. And entrepreneurs, like, I think we forget about HR sometimes. We've been out of corporate for so long. We totally forget about HR until we need to hire someone, or until we need to let go someone, or figure out oh shoot, I should have figured out this. Oh wait, we don't have the right contracts in place. Oh gosh. So we're always like, you know, behind the ball. Usually. Well, I'm thinking for myself generally, but generally entrepreneurs don't think ahead on the HR stuff. As much as they probably should. So I love this opportunity that you have. So tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. And it's called The Resource, and it's an online portal in membership. And what I designed was we call it an employee life cycle. So from the time you think about hiring someone all the way through the time you might have to separate them, right? So it talks about your people strategy, and you have to have and understand your business strategy in order to get a good people strategy. And then how do you onboard and hire? How do you manage people? You know, compensation. How do you do performance management? And then how do you have those conversations around separation and development? And so each of those areas has really simple little modules in them. They're just simple PowerPoints that I've narrated with clear definitions and clear understanding and steps you need to follow. And then I also have a whole section that's downloadable. So I've put out there for you examples of job descriptions. Here's a list of the posters you have to have this year. Here's some interview questions that you can and cannot ask. You know, so I really want, and those are part of the membership, so you can download them, you can adjust them, you can change them. There's no copyright on those. I want people to be able to use them, right? So you don't have to start from scratch. But the whole idea is you can really go in there, and depending on what you're trying to do, there's at least something to get you started. And there will also be some additional content that's loaded. I did an interview with a employment lawyer that's out there. I've got a whole series, Taking the Panic Out of Pandemic webinar series, that is in the process of being loaded out there for content for members. And then we talked about the PPP program that's here in the US. We talked about unemployment benefits changes, the FFCRA, which was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and what that meant, and really getting people information about what they needed to do during the pandemic. And the reality is, some of those things you still need to do, even when you come back, or even when the pandemic is over. There were just some really good practices that came out of there with some of the experts that I had on. So that content will be there. And I'm going to continuously update it at least annually just to make sure, because laws do change. And so I'll be updating that, potentially adding some modules. There are 30 plus modules out there right now. So as
Amazing.
something comes up and it's necessary, I'll add some. But it's really a place for solopreneurs or very small businesses to at least go and get an answer, because the idea is, I want you, if you're going to spend dollars, at least to have enough information for you to ask the right questions. So instead of going to an attorney and say, okay, I don't know what to do, which is, a $500,000 bill,
Yeah.
you can say, nope, okay, so I've got this situation with my employee. Here's my documentation. Here's what I think I need to do. I need a couple of hours of your time to get prepared. That may be just a $300 bill, right? So if you're going to spend money on ROI, and then also giving people that foundation to say, again, it's not rocket science. It is not hard, but there is detail there from a compliance perspective. And there's also a real need to understand how to be compassionate, but lead with your heart, but act with your head, because the places you can write the biggest checks is when you do a mess up in HR. And I just don't want people to have to do that.
Ooh, that's another good quotable. The biggest checks you're going to write are in HR.
Yes.
That is a little bit of a scary one. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Wow. Yes. Amazing. Laurel, that's so cool. So tell us a little bit about how your podcast has fit into your business, what it's done for your business, and the successes you've had from it over the last year.
Well, number one, I love it. I never knew that I would love it, and I just love it. And so it fits into my business because, again, that whole Rutledge perspective, it is me. My business is me. I am the brand. And so that ability to have this podcast platform so that people get to know who I am and what my perspective is on things, as well as get to meet some of these amazing women through the podcast, really begins to build a foundation so that those people who are looking for someone like me can find me. As one of my coaches says, if you're not visible, how are the people that need you going to find you? And so it's one way that I've been able to actually bring people in. So I've had several people reach out to me to say, hey, I heard your podcast, or I really love your podcast. And with using you guys, Amplify You, I mean, it's just the downloads are really ramping up, which is so exciting to see. Because I remember hearing, don't worry about subscriptions. Nobody ever subscribes, but they do download. And so seeing those downloads creep up, seeing people starting to share it, that has really made an impact. I can see that on Instagram. I see people waiting for the next episode. And so now it's just about me also continuing to learn, right? With you and with your coaching and with all the information you have with your team, is continuing to use that to build and to engage. But it's really served to bolster my brand and kind of bookend it, right? So yeah, I've got a website, but having the podcast gives people more insight into who you are. And I think that's really important, because if you want to work with me, you need to know who I am. And I'm not for everyone. And I know a lot of people. So if you talk to me and it's not a fit, I probably know somebody who is a fit. And I believe that you make those connections, because there's plenty for everyone. And so it's been a great, great stepping stone and a great booster for my business. And I just love it. I love it.
That's so awesome. So great to hear. I love how the way you're positioning it in your business too, as really allowing people to hear your voice. And
Yes.
I think your clients are going to come to you now more prepared to say yes to working with you. They've heard you, they understand you, they've listened to you. And they're like, yes, you're the person for me.
Right.
Which I think is a really great thing about podcasting, is you really get to weed out the people that you're going to have your true followers there. And they're not only that, they're really avid followers. They really listen and adore you and respect everything you're saying too. And they turn into great clients over at the end of the day, don't they?
Yes. Well, and I think for you got your listeners who are maybe thinking about starting a podcast or who've got one, I say, don't get discouraged, because I've actually had people reach out to me that I've known for years. But people who reached out to me and said, oh, I listened to your podcast. I'm like, really? Really? I didn't even know you knew what a podcast was, right? So they really are, you never know. People will stalk you for a while and you'll never know they're there. So just keep doing it and be consistent, which is my bigger issue. I think a lot of people's issue is really just be consistent and stay out there. I'm only once a week. I'm doing it on Wednesdays, but I'm trying to make sure that I am there every Wednesday, even if it means I'm repurposing an episode like I did a couple weeks ago because so much was going on. But just making sure I show up every week is good for me too. And it's really good to to make that connection. And so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference in the business.
I love that. And so Laurel, we were just talking before you press record, where typically you've been going live on Facebook first, and then we've been taking those recordings and turning them into your podcast. So from the podcast, now you're looking at using StreamYard, because StreamYard can go live into LinkedIn, which I think is so smart for you, because this specifically in the HR field and a corporate field, that's a really great place for you to be. So now just walk us through that. You're going to record live every Wednesday still, but using StreamYard.
Right. Yes. So it's kind of weird. I've got a strange process, but it works for me. So when I decide what I want to do for my podcast, if it's not an interview, so an interview, I've got a standard interview kind of sheet that I go through, but honestly, I let the spirit guide us. So depending on what somebody says, that's kind of where the interview will take us. And those are about 20 to 30 minutes for an interview. But if it's just me, I actually write an article that will become a LinkedIn article. From that, then I will record a video, and the video will go up on my website, and I pull the audio from that video to be my podcast. But then I take my radio show, which is live on Facebook, and that then I load into YouTube and I'll put out on my channels. And I'm starting to actually take snippets from that, and was talking to Troy about that before, taking snippets from that and have that actually be now podcasts, because that's an hour long. And so people don't have that kind of attention span. So clipping that down to make that into really meaty conversation, because it's also a back and forth. It's a different kind of format. It's a different feel, but it's still me. It's still authentic, and it's still around that HR and personal development space. And so by using StreamYard, it's going to enable me to not only continue to post live to Facebook, where people can see it if they can follow the show, but I'll post live to LinkedIn, which gives me a whole different audience. And I'll be able to then, as I save those down, clip those pieces and have those be audio that's also loaded directly to the podcast and listen and put out there. So it's all about multiple purposes, or repurposing that content that we use. So you don't have to, do 1,200 interviews or 60 videos. Right. You can actually take that one, and I'm using it for ads, I'm using it for podcasts, I'm using it for videos for my website. And so it actually ends up being really great podcast content, which I hadn't really thought about it until you and I talked about it. I'm like, oh wait, I've got all this, I have this asset that I need to start putting on my podcast. So
and they love it, right? Like there's so many different ways that you can use all the content that you already have and repurpose it in different ways. And I was even mentioning to you before we press record, like the summit you're planning on doing a little bit of an interview before the summit, so that then you've got some more podcast interviews as well as the summit interviews, and maybe even turning it into private audio. I mean, like the sky is the limit with the amount of content you have. And I just thank you for walking us through your process, because I think it's a little bit different than most people. And so it might give some people some idea who maybe already have a vlog, but they don't. We're seeing a lot of that right now. We're seeing a lot of people coming to us who already have a vlog, but they don't have it in it, it's not on any audio programs. Or they have the video component, but not the audio. Or, so I think that's a really great process. And what a smart way to actually record it as well. And as long as you are, I always say to people, warning them about like the lives, right? So you can't it's not the lives that you can interact back and forth with the audience the whole time. Right. Those lives do not correlate into podcasts that sound good.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
It's a specific kind of live that you have to do. So you're live, but you're not talking to them.
Exactly.
Do you do the other kind of live additionally, where you can then talk back and forth with the audience, or you just do the lives that you can just record?
I usually, the lives that I've been doing have really just been me for the lives. But the radio show, even though it streams live, my producer is there. And so we're kind of back and forth during the time. So that's a little bit different. People don't see her. She hates being on camera. So they see me. I don't love being on camera either, but I do it because it's the right thing to do. So that is a back and forth, but because it's a radio format, which is similar to a podcast format, it works a little bit differently. So we're, very much, it's mostly me, but she'll ask a question, or she'll say, hey, somebody's got a question on the line, and she'll read it, and then we'll talk about it, and go forward. So, so, and I do encourage, thank you for that, for my process. I do encourage people to find their own process. I have to do that because my head, my brain moves really fast and gets really messy. And so if I can write it down, then it gets it out of my head and gets it clean. So then when I do video, because I don't read on my videos, they say record and I just go. And based on a format that Carrie Murphy taught, just to really get clean video, it's so much more authentic if you're just talking to that one person. And so if I can get it out of my head, then I can be much more authentic on camera, which means it's much more authentic in the audio when you cut it out of the video as well. So,
and you've already kind of like put it together in your head and written it out on paper, which is interesting.
exactly.
I think it really depends on what kind of learning style you have too,
Exactly.
as to which order those things go. And I know for me, like I cannot sit down and write anything. I'll have to like speak it first,
Yes,
then turn it into written afterwards. So it really depends on how you function
exactly.
as a person and how you learn. But interesting, another interesting thing that's come out with podcasting recently is like, think about where your listeners are listening. Like everyone's consuming everything on mobile. So everything you need to do needs to be accessible on mobile. And when you already have someone listening to you, like give them more stuff to listen to, not just send them to a PDF to read, because they're listening. And so when they're already reading something, that's great. You've given them now an article to read more of. So whatever platform you're on, more videos, send them to more videos, more audio, send them to more audios. If they're reading, send them to more written stuff. And so rather than getting them to jump around on all the different platforms, I think that's a really great streamline way of doing it. So thank you for kind of walking us through that and kind of showing us. And so, Laurel, where can we find out more information about you? Well, first of all, everyone go subscribe and review Laurel's show, The Rutledge Perspective. Okay, so go there, check it out. It's a great show. You'll learn tons of stuff, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you know nothing about HR. Like me. I learn things from the show all the time. So picked up some really great tips, how to run my team and things not to do and things to do.
Awesome.
And it's been really great. So you guys make sure you go check it out on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. It's all over the place. YouTube, go check out our YouTube channels. And Laurel, where can we find out more information about your membership, your HR membership called the resource?
For the resource. Yeah. So the easiest way to get to me is just go to my website, laurelrutledge.com. And on there, you will see a little place where you can say, it says online, it says HR advisory services. And you click there and it takes you directly to it. And so you can get to the platform, you can see what you need. You can also reach out to me that way. The podcast is there, the videos are there, everything is right there on my website. So laurelrutledge.com is the easiest way to find me.
And if you cannot remember Rutledge, just remember out of your rut and off the ledge.
Off of the ledge, yes. Thank you, BB Goldstein. Yes.
It's such a good little tagline. So good. I love it. Yes. Well, Laurel, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been fun having you. Can't wait to bring you back again as things move along and see where things are going for you. So once again, guys, make sure you go check out the Rutledge Perspective podcast. Laurel is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Amplify You team, make sure you guys have a great week out there. Be safe. Go subscribe to a new podcast. Listen to it. Let us know how you liked it. And until next time, be safe out there.